Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question is, can I analyze the case of Paul Pelosi and David DePape? Just a reminder, I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video, only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, subscribe to my channel, and consider supporting me on Patreon. I'll put the link to Patreon in the description for this video. First, I'll look at the background of this case, move to the timeline of the crime, then offer my analysis. This case involves two people, Paul Pelosi and David Wayne DePape. I will briefly look at Paul's background, then move to David's. Paul Pelosi was born on April 15, 1940. In 1957, Paul was driving a vehicle that was involved in a collision. His older brother was killed. Paul was later acquitted of misdemeanor manslaughter. As a matter of coincidence, his older brother was named David. Paul earned a bachelor's degree in foreign service from Georgetown University. During his time there, he met his future wife, Nancy Pelosi. At the time making this video, Nancy is the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives. Paul owns a company that's involved in real estate and venture capital investment. This has made Paul and his wife, Nancy, quite wealthy. Together, they are worth about $114 million. The couple lives in a $6 million house in the Pacific Heights neighborhood of San Francisco, California. In May 2022, Paul was arrested for DUI after being involved in a collision in his Porsche. He pleaded guilty in August and was sentenced to 5 days in jail. Now moving to the background of David DePape. David was born sometime around 1980 and grew up in Powell River, British Columbia, Canada. Relatives described him as reclusive, nonviolent, and heavily committed to video games. Sometime around the age of 20, he became estranged from his family and moved to California. David lived in Berkeley and was romantically involved with a notorious nudist activist. They had 2 sons together. She would later say that David was mentally ill and that he once believed that he was Jesus. According to a friend of David's, he once lived in a storage unit and had a drug problem. He made a living by selling bracelets made of hemp. He was extremely shy. For example, he was unable to open a bank account because he was afraid to talk to a teller. David allegedly sent disturbing emails to people in which he sounded out of touch with reality, appeared to be dangerous, and used biblical references to justify doing harm. By October 2022, David was living in a school bus outside the home of his former nudist lover. David made a number of unusual posts on the internet, including on social media. A few examples: he posted videos with offensive and bizarre titles. One video was titled, "Noah Survived the Collapse of Atlantis." David made blog posts which contained anti-Semitic and racist content and believed that colleges were becoming cults. He appeared to have an affinity for Adolf Hitler, Donald Trump, and Jordan Peterson, and was not a fan of Hillary Clinton. David believed that George Floyd died from a drug overdose, and his killer was falsely convicted. He posted links to multiple videos produced by Mike Lindell, who is the CEO of MyPillow. The videos feature Mike falsely claiming that the 2020 presidential election was stolen from Donald Trump. David did not appear to be a big fan of COVID vaccines and believed that global elites were using coronavirus to promote a new world order. He posted links to content on the QAnon conspiracy theory. David believed that he was being visited by what he referred to as an invisible fairy, who sometimes appeared to him in the form of a bird. He apparently wanted to buy a miniature house for the mythical creature on the website Etsy, but was frustrated because all of the miniature houses available there had fake doors. David wrote, quote, "They have a lot of fairy houses, but none of them are made for fairies," unquote. I find this interesting because one version of the mythology of fairies states that these magical creatures were angels who became trapped between heaven and hell. God ordered the gates of heaven shut, and some angels were locked out of heaven. This connects back with David's concern. Maybe he thought the mythical creatures would be standing outside of the miniature house, banging on the fake doors and saying, "Seriously, Again, we get locked out. Why does this keep happening to us? Now moving to the timeline of the crime. During the early morning hours of October 28, 2022, Paul Pelosi was in his residence in San Francisco. His wife, Nancy Pelosi, was in Washington, D.C. According to the police, 42-year-old David DePape broke into the back door of the Pelosi residence and confronted Paul. At some point during the confrontation, Paul Pelosi told David DePape that he needed to use the bathroom. Paul called 911 at 2:27 a.m., but apparently did not feel as though he could speak freely on the call. It was like he was trying to avoid aggravating the intruder. The 911 operator heard Paul saying, quote, "What's going on? Why are you here? What are you doing to me?" unquote. The operator contacted police dispatch and described Paul's situation by saying, quote, "He states there's a male in the home and that he is going to wait for his wife. He stated that he doesn't know who the male is, but that his name is David and that he is a friend. He sounded somewhat confused," unquote. The police responded within 2 minutes and knocked on the front door. Someone on the inside of the residence opened the door. The police encountered Paul and David in a physical altercation. Each of them had one hand on a single hammer. The police ordered both men to drop the hammer. David pulled the hammer away from Paul and attacked him with it, striking him in the head at least one time. At some point, David was shouting, "Where is Nancy? Where is Nancy?" The police tackled David and arrested him. He was in the possession of a manifesto containing anti-government beliefs and a list of other politicians he planned on targeting. David was also carrying a bag containing zip ties and other items. The media falsely reported that David was in his underwear, I'm guessing in an attempt to make him look bad, but David was already doing a pretty good job of that himself. Paul Pelosi was taken to the hospital and underwent surgery to repair a skull fracture, as well as serious injuries to his right arm and hands. He is expected to make a full recovery. Now moving to my analysis. Whenever a case like this comes up, it leads to the emergence of a series of predictable political arguments. For example, some Democrats are blaming Republicans for the attack, especially Republicans who support Trump. Nancy Pelosi has been a favorite target of people on the far right. Therefore, there's this idea that her critics have encouraged people to take things too far. Others argue that David's alleged behavior is isolated. He may have been inspired by politics, but his actions were primarily fueled by mental health symptoms. There are two questions I'll answer as far as this attack. One, why has Nancy Pelosi become a target for the far right? And two, what were the thought processes of David DePape? Looking at the first question, why has Nancy Pelosi attracted so much negative attention from certain figures on the far right? There's something about Nancy Pelosi which really aggravates right-wing extremists and conspiracy theorists. She is a frequent target of criticism, despite there being other high-profile figures available, like Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. I think there are a few reasons why Nancy has attracted so much attention from conspiracy theorists. Nancy has been in politics a long time, therefore she is quite well known. She is in a leadership position as Speaker of the House. She has become a symbol of the progressive movement and is thought of as being on the far left. Many Democrats don't think that Nancy is actually on the far left, which is one of the reasons that some Democrats don't like her. Nancy represents much of the San Francisco area, which is known as being a stronghold of liberal ideology. Perhaps that's one reason she's viewed as being extremely liberal. Nancy and her husband have made millions of dollars trading on the stock market. Some people wonder if they are using insider knowledge to do this. Nancy has been an outspoken critic of Donald Trump. She has even engaged in behaviors which some people consider disrespectful, like her sarcastic clap during Trump's State of the Union speech in 2019 and tearing up his speech a year later. Certain figures on the right view Nancy's image as consistent with popular conspiracy theories, like the idea of the wealthy liberal elite trying to take over the world, or the alien lizard humanoid takeover. There, of course, is another conspiracy theory which combines these two, so the alien lizard humanoids are the wealthy liberal elite. To the far right, Nancy has become a symbol of all that they dislike in the far left. Whenever a politician is targeted with personal attacks, there will be those who misinterpret the political process and take inappropriate and sometimes illegal actions. This brings me to the thought processes of David DePape. In looking at the various reports about David, his personality profile and behavior seem to be consistent with other conspiracy theorists who have committed acts of violence. David was a loner. He allegedly had a substance use problem. He was socially awkward. For example, he had trouble making eye contact. He frightened people with his disturbing statements. He made posts on the internet which were racist. He believed colleges were indoctrinating people as part of a far-left agenda. He thought coronavirus was part of a liberal conspiracy. David believed in the New World Order. He was attracted to the QAnon conspiracy theory. He believed that Donald Trump was cheated out of the presidency. And he believed that tiny mythical creatures were having housing problems. That one isn't actually linked to conspiracy theorists who commit acts of violence, but I thought I would throw it in there anyway. David had an intense fear of the liberal elite. Nancy Pelosi, as I mentioned, has become a symbol of the liberal elite for many right-wing extremists. Therefore, it makes sense that David would not be a fan of Nancy Pelosi. Moving to the next question, why do attacks like this happen? Is it because the political rhetoric has become inappropriate and inspires violence, or is there another explanation? There is no question that political rhetoric has become out of control and unhelpful. There was a time when members of opposing parties criticized positions, but now the tendency is to challenge the character of politicians. People don't know how to disagree politely anymore. The rise of cancel culture captures this lack of critical thinking skills pretty well. I think the fact that this political discourse has moved from lively to destructive has set the stage for disaster. Those who are vulnerable to conspiracy theories now have an ever-present, intense, and frightening narrative with which they can connect. People who have pronounced conspiratorial thinking often demonstrate cluster A personality pathology. They have schizoid, schizotypal, and paranoid personality features. Years ago, people like this didn't really have many places they could go to connect with other people about their beliefs. The conspiracy theories they came up with would follow predictable patterns and often involve aliens, the CIA, the FBI, and evil government conspirators. There wasn't much specificity with the conspiracy theories. No one person was singled out. Rather, the people maintained a general fear of an unknown enemy. They didn't feel as though they could do anything about it, other than complain to anyone who would listen. These days, with the internet and social media, a person with conspiratorial thinking can easily engage in a larger and more highly organized conspiracy theory, like QAnon. In a sense, ease of communication led to the construction of a community. This community is fed by political polarization. They use that as their raw material to build conspiracy theories. These factors come together to facilitate a higher level of organization. With this organization, people can manufacture content for conspiracy theories 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. There is a seemingly endless supply which radicalizes people who have conspiratorial thinking. In addition, the conspiracy theories are now filled with a lot of details, like the names of politicians who are supposedly evil conspirators. The people being falsely portrayed as the bad guys are no longer nameless. With this structure in place, instead of just having conspiratorial beliefs, people are motivated to act on them. There is a next level, which is described in the organized conspiracy theories, and people desire to achieve that level. Conspiracy theorists now see a solution to the fabricated problem, whereas years ago, they never did. Essentially, people who were paranoid and having magical thinking are now being given directions and encouraged to act. I think this is what happened in the case of David DePape. He was not inspired to violence exclusively due to an inconsiderate and destructive political debate. Rather, it was the entire conspiracy theory community that played a part. The attack on Nancy Pelosi is a symptom of a larger problem. it was partially caused by intellectually lazy arguing, which primarily features personal attacks. Those are my thoughts in the case of Paul Pelosi and David DePape. Please put any opinions and thoughts in the comment section. They always generate an interesting dialogue. As always, I hope you found my analysis of this topic to be as intriguing as tiny mythical creatures calling a locksmith to get in their house. Thanks for watching.